over the years, there's been many people who've become very influential and long-standing members of the Sooty family. And very rarely do you get to meet all of them. If I was to show you this picture of a very early Soo, it would cue the introduction of the much-loved and highly talented Brenda Longman.
How very kind.
Brenda, explain your association with Soo.
Well, I began being the voice of Soo in 1981. I knew Matthew Corbett and he asked me to go and audition. I believe there were 2 other contenders, but I won the prize.
That's
so next year that'll be 30 years of being the voice of Soo.
Now, obviously we've been watching some of the old Harry material, and Soo's voice was, you were too young to be the voice of Soo.
Well, I was actually, because she was introduced in 1963 when I was a mere, I think I was at primary school or something like that. But no, it was Marjorie who did the first voice of Soo. And
that's Harry's wife.
That is Harry's wife. She was known as Tobes.
Well, I never got to meet Harry or Marjorie Corbett. Sadly, they long passed away when I came onto the scene. But watching these films, it strikes me just how passionate they both were, actually.
Well, they both were, and I mean, she was the driving force behind Harry.
Really?
I mean, yes. I mean, he obviously was the creative genius, but he wouldn't have been anything without Tobes, really, you know.
Having met Harry Corbett and seen behind the scenes, you know, I suspect, and please tell me if I'm right or wrong, that his love of Sooty probably came first in his life. I mean, am I exaggerating?
No, he did. He loved it. I mean, he loved animals as well. I mean, the whole family love animals, but I mean, he did adore Sooty, and I think that always comes across, doesn't it? This great affection for something which is actually showing him no respect at all.
So why did Marjorie decide to not? When did Marjorie finish? What came about?
When did she retire? Well, I hope she'll forgive me because she's up there. But in fact, I think she sort of retired herself because she did smoke rather a lot, and she used to sort of run out of breath at the end of sentences, and actually posed a fire risk at Thames Television.
Really?
And I think it was suggested that perhaps she might stand down because Soo did sound a little old.
Right. Okay. Okay. So tell me, you've 30 years being the voice of Soo.
Yeah.
So completely through the era of Matthew.
Absolutely. I started the year after Matthew.
Who was?
In fact, I think I started with Matthew, actually.
What a completely different approach Matthew has to Harry.
Totally different approach. I mean, when you think about it, Harry had those puppets. They were flaunting authority. They did, and he had this enormous affection for them. Matthew came in as one of them, if you like. He suddenly took an equal part as the 4th idiot, if you like. Well, although Soo was always the sensible one. But when Harry was doing it, of course, the puppets were the naughty children.
Yes.
And you had that kind of
he was very much
parental,
in the background.
avuncular, very much in the background.
Right.
Matthew, with equal genius, of course, as a clown and an actor and a performer and a musician, came in and played an equal role with them, and so that the storylines then also became about him as well as what the puppets had done.
Sure.
So I think that's the main difference. And his relationship with them was completely different as well. They were equals to him rather than with Harry. They were actually more like naughty children.
I think, I mean, my certain appreciation of Matthew is certainly that he managed to keep the characters in current environments, contemporary environments.
Absolutely right.
Which moved, you know, enabled their survival for 30 years into this millennium.
And how he did that was quite clever because, in fact, he had 3 children of his own and they were sort of in similar ages and things to Sooty, Sweet and Soo. So anything that was happening to his children at the time, whether it was brownies or cubs or whatever they were doing at school, he managed to keep abreast of exactly what was going on and keep his finger on the pulse that way, which was great, really.
I know when Harry retired, in his retirement, he spent his last years building props for Matthew and scenery and stuff.
Because he loved the minutiae, you see, of everything.
Were you ever there when he was in the wings watching Matthew? And what did he think when he watched his son perform something so successfully that he'd been so close to him? I mean, what was because their relationship in the
He'd always have a note for him.
Really?
Yeah. Oh yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Which was cast aside and
Matthew.
Yeah, and also because he knew that Matthew had this quick wit and was very, very dry and almost a cruel sense of humour Matthew could have, actually.
Right.
He was outrageous. He is outrageous. Massive
Still?
Outrageous. Still outrageous.
Yeah.
I mean, and a wild child as a teenager.
In your time with Matthew on Sooty and Co. Do you have anything unusual, strange, or wild happen to you?
Well, just let me say to you that every time we shot a series, I had to take a week off and lie down because I'd laughed so much, and I suffered from physical exhaustion. And it wasn't through any of the work; it was through laughing so much.
Right.
They were outrageous shoots. They were legendary shoots, and we had legendary directors, as you know. We had Stuart Hall, who Morecambe and Wise, and legendary comedy directors. But as far as I'm concerned, as a voiceover artist, the one thing that sticks in my mind is when we were all watching Jeff Capes on the end of a rope with Sweep, and everybody, the whole crew, 46 of us, all facing a tug of war. And suddenly I'm screaming for Jeff Capes, no loyalty. That's where the puppets are like the Marx Brothers, you see. There's this anarchy, because they're not loyal to one another. They're vile to each other, really. And suddenly, whack, in my back, was this thump, and a goat had escaped and butted me. I was wearing a sheepskin coat, and obviously it thought I was one of its own. And and I was flat on my face. Fortunately, the camera swung round and caught me lying flat down in a cow pat. Extraordinary thing. So I needed danger money for that. I mean, that's just a lot. There's loads and loads of things that happened on location. Obviously, there was over 20 odd years. But,
well, long may it continue there.
Thank you very much.
Nemesis,
my little nemesis there.
It's a lovely little
pop
picture.
Culture legends.
I love this little picture of Soo, because as a child I remember Harry and the band, and I remember Matthew taking over from Harry and being quite, sort of not against him. People resist change in the way that I've spent my last few years trying to justify any vague form of existence in Matthew's shoes, that people they're used to who they know. And I remember Harry, and I particularly remember Soo at the piano.
She's a good pianist, wasn't she?
Yeah, she was great.
She was. I wish I was as good a pianist
and I
as
still have that piano in the archive. It still exists.
Do you really?
I think we should brush it off one day and
I
get it
think
out.
so. Yes.
It's been a pleasure talking to you, Miss Longman.
Thank you, Mr.
And long may our working relationship.
And may I just say, I'm so glad that Sooty is safe in your hands.
Well, we try.
And can I just say, of course, we first met on the Sooty show when you came on as the Young Magician of the Year at 18 years old.
Yeah, younger. 1985 that was.
1985. And I gave you a lift to the station.
You did give me a lift to the station. And if only I'd have known that 20 years later...
We'd be sitting here.
We'd be sitting here. We're getting very, very indulgent now, everybody. I think we should say bye-bye. Let's do it. Bye-bye, everybody.
Bye-bye.